Hi, everyone. I'm Resham Arden, and welcome to the Now I Know podcast, where we educate our audience on wellbeing topics. With me today is Sonia Hunt from San Francisco, a global speaker, a best-selling author, and coach. And I wanted to emphasize San Francisco because you're my first US guest, Sonia. So welcome.
Thank
Yay!
you. I'm so honored.
You are so that I'm privileged to have you. So I've been following you on LinkedIn and we've connected. You've also been on my friend's podcast, Tolu, and we've been engaging. So I was really interested in interviewing you because I feel like we're both aligned. Like you really care about the well-being space. You've been through your own, challenges in your life, and I just love what you're sharing. But enough about what I've seen. I'd love you just to tell the audience who is Sonia Hunt.
Yes. Wow. How long is this podcast?
As long as you need it.
Days about that. Very great question. As you mentioned, I am a health and wellness global speaker, a best-selling author, and a coach. I've also had a very long and successful career in Silicon Valley, the last 25 years in tech. And, I can say that it's really been a journey of my life has kind of been a journey of really like finding myself and coming back to myself uh, with through health and well-being as a foundation. So my story kind of originates in when I was 3 years old. I was diagnosed with severe chronic conditions. So that was severe food allergies, severe environmental allergies, and asthma, the trifecta that like nobody wants. And very, very difficult for my immigrant parents who had come from India to the US, had, my siblings and I in the US, and they didn't even know people could be allergic to food. It was, as a family, it was very difficult to get this diagnosis because throughout my life, I would have many incidents, right? So I could eat something and have a reaction like hives, or I could eat something and go into anaphylaxis, which means that my throat was closing up, I couldn't breathe, and we're off to the ER. And it's a very dire situation, like a life and death situation. So kind of having that be a part of my life really changed the trajectory of just who I was and how I lived my life, and really what I wanted, to do with my life. And from a cultural standpoint, we didn't really promote, my culture didn't promote speaking openly about what I was going through, how I felt, my feelings, my thoughts, the struggles. And so all my life, I was really lived this duality. To the outside world, I was like perfectly put together, right? Hair on point, eyebrows on fleek. But internally, I was like dying, crumbling. Um, and so, that was for decades and decades. And I took that really across all areas of my life until it all really blew up, one day. And the blow up was a fourth anaphylaxis where I was on the ER table, almost dead again. And it was the worst incident I had because it left me with hives all over my body for a year, which I didn't know even
Wow.
was possible, right? And I think that, being in the hospital for days in such an emergent situation and then having hives for a year, I just hit rock bottom, and I basically had a decision to make, which was either I'm going to continue to be on autopilot and live, unconsciously, right? For decades, I just followed what the doctors told me to do. Wasn't the best information, but I just said, they know better than I do. What do I know? Or you have to really just say, this is not how I want to live. There are things I want to do in my life. I have interests, desires, wishes, dreams. And you have to go down another path that is very, very scary, right? Because it's an empowerment path. And I felt like I had already been in anaphylaxis 4 times. I wasn't a cat. I didn't have like 9 lives. So I kind of thought, what the hell? Let's just go for it. And that decision made in fear is what completely, then transformed my life. And fast forward, you know, all of the work that I did not only improved my health because I eventually eliminated all of my food allergies, which is what my book is about,
Amazing.
but it also improved my career. I catapulted up to a C level. I've been a chief marketing officer in Silicon Valley for a long time. And just my life, right? Like I saw I started to live consciously, right? I started to make conscious decisions about people in my life, things I wanted to do, what I was eating, what jobs I was taking. So today, that's what I help people with, whether I do coaching or whether I'm speaking, is really helping people to kind of stop and pause and go inward because everybody's stuck in this, what I call triangle of health, life, and career. And a lot of times we just push it on the side because we're like, we just got to keep going, 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 which is what I did until it blew up, right? It was crisis mode. And I had to stop and start getting unstuck and really figuring out how to maneuver through all of those because they're so tightly coupled.
Wow.
And, and so when my book came out, and so, yeah, so it was I wrote the book primarily for myself to kind of like free myself of all this burden. But I also wrote it for every single person out there who only knew the word survival in their life, like I did, and never knew the word thrive. Right.
Yes.
and and that is, where my whole world is I truly believe that everybody can thrive, and it starts with that first decision, similar with what I made. And we can't do it alone. We need help, right? And and uh so it's been quite a journey. So when you ask who is Sonia Hunt, I think, she's somebody who has been through a lot, has learned a lot, and is still learning, but is really focused on helping people find themselves so that they can thrive and really live the life they want, which is very similar to the journey that I went through.
Oh, wow. What an amazing journey. You said, from survival to thrive. One thing I noticed with especially immigrant families, like you said, they said, you couldn't even speak up. And they're just always in survival mode as well, isn't it? Our parents' generation. So like when you have a lot of people from immigrant families talk about just duality, isn't it? In all parts of their lives. So how did they support you in that journey of opening up and getting help? Because it impacts them at home as well as you.
Yeah, it was, you know, it, it was difficult because I had to first make the decision myself that I couldn't let anybody tell me otherwise, because for so many decades I had done it that way, right? And it wasn't benefiting me. So, I really just had to quiet the noise and say, this is the decision with conviction that I've made. And, I'm the priority. We'll get to your feelings later, right? And then it was a journey of kind of educating my, parents, because I'm first generation American, my siblings and I. So it was really educating them on the why I felt this way, what I was dealing with, what support I needed from them. And I have to say, thankfully, they were open. I think that if I was like a child, I wouldn't have been able to do that, right? And rightfully so, because I was diagnosed at such a young age. They took over how, I was managing everything from a health and well-being and medical perspective, along with my doctors. But because I was older, when this fourth anaphylaxis had happened, I was able to kind of like not just parent, and child, but like friend to friend, have this conversation with my parents to say, explain how important this was for me to have their partnership and support in this. And it was a real learning curve, for them. Like there was a point where when I left the emergency room, they sent me home with like a bag full of medication. I was taking like 30 pills a day. And those
Oh,
pills were giving me like brain fog and just all these side effects, that you can imagine. And I remember saying to my mother, having this conversation, I just said, Mom, I feel like I'm going crazy. Like I was back at work and people are like asking me things and my brain's like not functioning. And I'm just kind of sitting in meetings, looking at people wide eyed. But it's my team. I'm running the team. And I said, I'm really scared about the effects of all this medication. And so, she was the one who started talking about, I think we should look for, a Ayurvedic doctor, who, does homeopathy. And that was kind of a real conversation, of like not just mother and child, but just like, you know, supportive relationship where she was listening to me, what I felt like maybe for the first time about my needs, right? And that was really beautiful because we did then find, the right kind of help to get for me. But it was definitely a learning curve that I would say my entire life with these health issues was a learning curve for them.
Yeah. I really like how you said it was like friend to friend, because that's like not lecturing, isn't it? It's like we're going on this journey together and
Yeah.
supporting each other, which I think is really, really lovely.
Yeah.
Um, but you are like a top CEO in this company. Like you must be an amazing role model to so many individuals in Silicon Valley. So talk to me about your career. Like what are you sort of role modeling in terms of the business side of things?
Yeah, so having spent such a long time as a chief marketing officer, there's always like a ton of pressure and you have to push your team. And the old ways of authoritarian leadership, of seeing your team as transactions rather than human beings, it's done. I mean, if the last few years have showed us anything, it's that all of that blew up in our face, especially in Silicon Valley, where I feel like most of that is. I am certified as a coach, and I purposefully did that as well because I did not in my career have great leaders that I reported to. I had very, very, very toxic leaders. And I feel like I always wrote down that one day, if I became a leader, I don't want to do XYZ, right? I want to do ABC. And so getting that, coaching certification, working on it allowed me to see every person on my team as a human being with problems, wants, needs, and desires. And my job is to understand what, those problems, wants, needs, and desires are, to remove their obstacles and to help them achieve their dreams. I've had people say, well, Sonia, one day I want your job. And I'm like, great, come and get it and I can go move on to the next thing, right? Let me help you get there. And so especially on LinkedIn, I talk a lot about this, right? As a speaker, I speak at corporations on just employee well-being. And that focus, I believe, is really about each person going inward and working on these inner skills that will give you the competitive edge going forward. Things like self awareness, self regulation, adaptability, resilience, empathy, right? All these have become superpowers more than the fact that you can code Java, right? Because AI is going to be assisting with that as well. But these soft skills and how you relate to people and how you help them to thrive is the most difficult part. And we're just at the infancy of this kind of work, which is why I chose to do it kind of one on one coaching with people and then speaking at corporations on how organizations can get around this. And so that work is really important to me because once upon a time, I do feel like I wasn't that leader. And, it goes back to that, like kind of doing things unconsciously. And I just kind of snapped it into place to say, that's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. And that's not what my team deserves. So let me go and do the work to be the best person for them that I can.
Amazing. I think because you've been there and you also know what a bad leader looks like, like you said, you wrote it down, it's exactly who I don't want to be. So if you've got any vacancies, let me know. Love to come and work for you. But it's funny you say that because that leader as well in the office, that I really care about the well-being of my people. And soft skills, I think, are so underrated, and they need to have more value in companies. And I run a workshop called sort of high performing teams, but it's all about, if your people are happy and healthy, they will perform. It's your people that drive the revenue, it's the people that drive performance. So when you have leaders who are just caring about the numbers and the hours and they just it doesn't burnout doesn't bother them. There's only You're right, it's not going to last long, these businesses that operate in that way. So if there is a leader listening, they might be starting out in their journey, and they're like, what is the first step to looking after my team's well-being? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, again, great question. There's so much, but I think, leadership really needs to, I think if they can make that first distinction between, again, like people as transactions, what that means is also like employee numbers, right? I'm employee number 7, 8, 9, 10, right? I'm a transaction, right? You don't know anything about me and my problems, wants, needs, and desires, and why I'm here at the company, etc. I believe entire structure has to change. How we recruit for people, how we interview them and get to know them, and then how we manage them, right, when they're in the company itself. And from the top down, if you can start rethinking that these are people that work for me, to these people are invested in the why of the company, the why of the product, the service, whatever you do. And they are partners that are helping me, CEO, to actually, build this product, help, the company thrive and flourish. Now we're starting to make a shift in thinking, right? So it's not you work for me, it's we're partners in this because we're aligned or foundationally around why we're here, what we're doing, what value it's putting into the world. And each single person is a human being, right? That has value and provides value in that process. But today it's just about, I'm CEO, I started the company, you all work for me, you're a transaction with an employee number, and if you don't do what I say, then you're out of here. And I think in the last few years, rightfully so, this is why we had great resignation and quiet quitting and everything, because everybody said, you know what, nope, not working like that anymore. You don't care about me. You've completely had me work 24/7, but look what a detriment is to my health now, and you've done nothing to help me along the process. I'm out of here. I'll find either somebody else that will treat me that way, or I'm going to start my own thing, right?
Yeah.
So
And that's all about your values, isn't it? What you
exactly.
accept in the workplace. Do you have any like leaders that don't agree with your vision, about people first, well-being first?
Yeah,
How do you overcome that?
I've probably worked for all of them. Yeah, probably all of my CEOs that I've worked for. It's interesting because there are many leaders out there that quietly will watch and hear what you say. I speak a lot at very large organizations, and the ones that invite me to come and speak, I think they are aligned with what I'm saying, and they're just stuck with how do we do it, right? And when I come and speak at corporations, I'm very focused on let me teach you how the things that you can do to get unstuck and do this, right? Um, there are many companies out there, and I talk to them where they are just like, this all sounds great, but like our people don't need it, and we'll talk to you next year or something. And that's somebody who's not in touch with their people,
Yeah.
right? Because if you look at statistics just in the United States alone of, health issues, everything from rise in chronic conditions to rise in, autoimmune decision, to just unhealthiness, it's more than a third now of Americans are unhealthy and unwell. And what I tell leaders is that's not some other group of people. That's your people.
Yeah,
right? So you have to kind of stop and think about this, right? You want the business to thrive. The only way business can thrive is if your people thrive. So yeah, I
absolutely.
think there's a lot of work to do to, I hate to say the word convince, but almost, convince leaders that this is a must have, not a nice to have.
Yeah. And you've experienced all this firsthand where you're working, you're burning out, and it's obviously affected your health. But, talk to me about in 2008 when you had an incident and yeah, really, really, that's when you really had to just just have a check-in with yourself. Talk about the incidents. I know you talk a lot about on the TED Talk, but for our audience listening about, your allergies and how you had to look after your health, give them a snippet of what happened in 2008 for you.
Yeah, so the big breakthrough was as a chief marketing officer, one of the greatest tools that my team and I developed was a marketing playbook, right? And that is a playbook, like an actual physical book that's strategy of like, with the product or the service that we are marketing, what's the strategy? Why are we doing it this way? What are we doing? So we've got like a product here today and we've got current state and what's that future state, right? Is it, $1 billion in revenue? And like, how do we get there? So I started thinking to myself, what if I actually created a well-being playbook, right? And I utilized the same theory, but just with me as a product, right? And there's a current state, and the current state, I wrote down bullet points of like, okay, hives all over my body, these allergies, taking strong medication, feeling this way. Kind of broke that up into the 4 areas of whole body health, which is like mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. And then I did an exercise of thinking of dream state outcome, right? Which is uh, no allergies, no hives, right? Being able to eat healthily, being able to age healthily. And so then it was a process of thinking of like, how do I get from current state to optimal state? What are all those little things that I can do on a daily basis? And then I went into massive like research mode along with, the medical doctors I worked with. And I came up with a program, which is all listed out in my book. I wrapped it up in a wonderful little name called 3 to Be. And I said, there are 3 steps to be healthy, be safe, and be well, because that is when in the process of writing the book, I asked my parents, what was like the wish that you had for your kids? And they came up with those 3. They said, we always wanted we were grateful if our kids were healthy. We always wanted them to be safe, right? They probably meant physical safety from no harm. But if you really layer that in, it's mental safety, emotional safety, and spiritual safety as well. And then they wanted their kids to prosper in life, and that's being well, right? So it all kind of was like coming together really nicely. And I created a well-being playbook, where again, I looked at myself as a product that was in a negative current state, that I wanted to get out of that and I wanted it to thrive. And that process included a lot of testing different things in my body, analyzing a lot of data, and then tweaking the things that I was doing to see what was working. And this is what eventually, all that work eventually led to getting rid of my allergies. And I've been in remission now since 2020. So I was, knock on wood, 3 years.
Wow, yeah, absolutely.
And it was a quite a intensive journey that I did, while I was working. And today now I feel like, I have 4 decades of experience to share with anybody, that I work with on how they can kind of get there quicker.
Yeah.
But so yeah, so I kind of used my day job, applied it to myself from a health and well-being perspective, and then helped myself thrive, which was kind of ironic.
That's brilliant. It's like it was just meant to be, isn't it? All these skills from an engineering background you've just applied to everything yourself. I think that's
Yeah,
amazing. So
yeah.
what does life look like now with no allergies compared to what were, because did you ever feel fearful every time you were going out to eat?
I think like this big weight came off my shoulders, right? And so once you do, the way allergies are gone is through blood testing. So there's skin testing, blood testing, component level blood testing, and then what they call an oral challenge. There's a lot when it comes to food allergies. The oral challenge is really the final test, which is, okay, Sonia, you're allergic to peanuts. Now let's eat a peanut and like watch what happens, which is very scary. So I went through all of that. And I think the main thing for me was, if and when I eat out at a restaurant, I always tell the server that I used to have a severe, food allergies, nuts, et cetera, et cetera. And I always ask them questions like, what oil do you use in your fryer or anything like that? And so I can still make decisions. I think the biggest burden that got lifted off is the cross contamination, right? Because there's always, I feel like
Yeah.
cross contamination in restaurants. Now my body should be able to withstand if there is any of that. Um, but I have, started eating some of the things I was allergic to. I just don't necessarily feel like all of a sudden you're going to find peanuts and tree nuts, like me eating those every day. Because I feel like I
Yeah.
haven't had them since I was 3. I don't really have an affinity for them. So,
Yeah.
yeah, there's just a big burden lifted that I can try things, right? And not be as fearful once upon a time, when I was eating outside of the house.
Yeah. And I remember when I watched your TED talk, and something I never thought, because I have nut allergies. They're not like, I won't go into shock or anything. I'll just come up with hives and I'll have to have an antihistamine. But I love the way you sort of said, I created a card with my picture on it and my allergies. And I just would never have thought of doing that. I thought it was such a great idea. So since seeing that anyone I know with allergy, I'm like, you got to watch Sonia's TED talk because she's made this card. You should do the same. But it was a really good idea. And I'm sure the restaurants appreciated it as well.
Well, I'll tell you, it's funny because it was really my mom, and I think I wrote this in the book too, that she was complaining to me after one time where there was like an incident. And she was like, just because you remember everything doesn't mean that they do. You should write it down. And I was
That's
like,
so
write
true.
it down. And so years later, I was like, oh, I should create this card. And I love the card because it became my business card. And I had my allergies on one side and like 911, my parents' cell phone numbers. And then I had my photo on the back. And it was like a beautiful glamour shot because I had fun with the card. And so every place that I would go, I would give it to them. And the conversations that start when you hand someone a card like that, I mean, I feel like I have friends all over the world that are just like, oh my God, I'm also allergic to that, or my wife is, or my daughter is. And then they look at the back photo and they were like, oh my God, love this photo. I've had chefs that keep it in their restaurant because they're like, we take this seriously. We want to keep a copy. When you come back in, like, we know who you
That's
are,
lovely.
etc. So it's a way that I say to humanize your situation. Again, as a marketer, I have always believed in humanized marketing. So I
Mm.
applied that again to myself, where I was like, I need to humanize my situation by educating people on what I'm going through, because why would they know if I didn't talk to them? For years, I didn't do that, but now I was on a different path, right? And that
Yeah.
card was one of the biggest breakthroughs. And I would say like 99.9% of the people in the food allergy community never carry, even still don't carry a food allergy card.
Yeah. Great idea. Since I've seen it, it's something I say. So, guys, if you've got an allergy, check out Sonia's TED Talk, and it's just I think it's just a great way of looking at things. That's why you're so good at what you do, Sonia. Brilliant. Obviously, I've mentioned the TED Talk. So, talk to me about the TED Talk. How did that come about? How was it received? I thought it was great.
Yeah. So it came about because somebody on that organizing committee knew of my brand, knew, kind of what I was talking about. And that year's theme was redefining normal. So that was such a perfect, fit for what I was speaking about. And yeah, so they asked me to come and speak, and very nerve wracking. I never in my life, they asked me like, would you ever consider it? And I thought to myself, well, I've never considered it because I just thought it was out of reach in my life. So yes, very, very, nerve wracking process, meaning like you're nervous, right? Getting up and speaking on the TED stage. But So well received. So many people. It's been viewed over 1 million times, and it still today is an evergreen story because in the last, oddly enough, 40 years, there hasn't been that much innovation in the food allergy space, which is so insane to even say that. But just like I said, these little things like allergy cards and things that you can really do to humanize your situation and get other people to help, which is what you really need. There hasn't been that much innovation in it. So I feel like it's an evergreen message. The issues that I talked about in it are still there today. There's no cure for food allergies. The only way to deal with it is by not eating food you're allergic to and taking a lot of medication. That's it,
Oh.
right?
But I know you talk about a lot about the allergies in your book, and obviously you've been through it. So, talk to your audience about your books. As if they've got an allergy, is it something that is definitely something they need to buy? Is it because you touch on the allergies in your book?
So my book is, I would say, it's really a story of empowerment, right? It's a story of going from going from being stuck to figuring things out because you become empowered, and going from living unconsciously to consciously. So there are all these wonderful, cute, funny stories of my life, right? All the things I did wrong and how I learned from it. And I've created it in a self-help way, which the program is in there, like what I did, so that people can follow. And it's not just for the people with food allergies. It is, yes, it shares my story on food allergies, but if you actually read it through, you can apply any of those steps to anything you're struggling with, right? If you're struggling with mental health issues, if you're struggling with wanting to lose weight, anything like that. So you can apply that same system, right? As you were saying, I'm an engineer by degree. So to me, it was a systematic way to get healthy, right? And taking these small daily steps for a big transformation. So yes, it shares my personal story of food allergy, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah, brilliant. We'll put the links in the show notes. Everyone can sort of access the books, but I think what you're doing is amazing. A speaker, an author, it's just amazing. It's never ending. So you're doing so much for people in the workplace, looking after them and doing these talks. Who supports you?
Well, I do have an incredible family and friends always around me. I always say I have, the greatest people around me, um, that showed up on the doorstep of the hospital that day, when I was in the ER, never left my side, were the ones that, when we would be at a restaurant and if the server, they felt like kind of didn't understand what I was talking about with my allergies. They're like, we're out of here. We're leaving. We're going to eat somewhere else. So, finding your true community that you feel comfortable to be vulnerable and open yourself to. And that was my doctors, that was my immediate family, that was, friends, acquaintances became, dear friends. So yeah, I have an incredible, very a community with a lot of depth that supports me on a daily basis, as I give back to them.
Yeah. And I think that's a key message I like to say to the audience as well is if you're going through a tough time, like we can only thrive by getting help from people around us. So that community is absolutely key, like trying to find that community, whether it's in the workplace or outside the workplace, friends or, third parties or therapists. I think it's a really great message that a lot of great people don't realize they've all had help in some sort of way. They don't do it on their own. I know we're talking about great leaders like yourself, Sonia, but what message would you say to a leader who's listening who doesn't display any of the values you're talking about, and it's all about just burnout and just results and not caring about their people? What message would you give to someone listening who isn't looking after the well-being of their people?
So I would say, first start with yourself, right? This is the one life you get. I'm somebody who has been almost dead 4 times on an ER table. So I've had that lesson been thrown at me, but I never listened clearly until the fourth time, right? So, first and foremost, like, this is the time you get on this earth. It's so important that you step out of your day to day and figure out, how you want to spend that time, what you want to do with it, what you want to put into the world, and go inward and take care of yourself first so that you can lead in the right way. You can lead people in the right way. You can help remove their obstacles to their, dreams. Because if you can't do this for yourself, you're never going to be able to do it for other people, right? And there are a lot of people out there that will try to sell you things, but I always say, talk to people who've been through it, like myself, right? And see what they did to kind of get to that transformation. So it's really about going inward for yourself first as a leader, and you know taking those steps to have your own transformation in health and well-being, and then being able to lead others in a different way, which will be a more conscious way.
Yeah, that's great. I really love how you've put that. And I think that's why, you know, how you talk about health, life, and career, because if you're burnt out at home, in the workplace, it affects your home, which then affects what it's just all intertwined, isn't it? Which is why I like the fact how you talk about it, like health, life, and career. Um, but oh, sorry, I just find you so inspirational, Sonia. I'm just lost for words. But you know, so this podcast is called Now I Know, about thriving in health, life, and career. If you could rewind time, what would you go back and say to the younger Sonia before she starts her career?
Oh my gosh. You know, the answers are really within. It's my journey. I will honestly say, for decades I didn't love myself. And it's so sad when I wrote those words in my book. And I mean, it also makes me feel a little bit when I talk about that, right? Because you know there's so many things about me for me to love, right? But for so long I just feel like I didn't deserve it, I wasn't worthy, I didn't have value, all of that. And and then when I was sick over and over and over, it kind of, I felt like, was validating, right? So I would say back then, to kind of look in the mirror and say, tell myself, right, that I am worthy, I am unique, I am, love, I am deserving of all of that stuff. And to really look within, because, your body is incredible. It's always telling you information, right? But unconsciously, we just keep moving, or we allow other people to tell us what to do with our body, our health. And, like that gut feeling, like sometimes you go against the gut feeling you have for many reasons. And so that's really what I would tell myself, is that to quiet all that noise and to really go inward and see this beautiful soul, that has, problems, wants, needs, dreams, desires, and to go live the life that I want, right? Get the help, do the research, work on it every day, take the small steps, but don't be afraid because you feel like you're not worthy or you don't have value or anything like that. Because in
Mm.
that fear in 2008 is where I found my power.
Sorry, that's really touching. Got lump in my throat. But you know what? One thing I've just sort of learnt from you in the last sort of half an hour is, you know, like you really empowered yourself with knowledge to transform. Um, and that's what, you know, I know we're talking about well-being in the workplace as well, but I think leaders, they need to start gaining that knowledge in terms of transforming their teams, their people themselves. Um, and like you said, to those leaders who aren't doing this, like, your glass has to be so full before you can look after others. So you're right, just looking inwards is so key. And I think the message you're sending out there is amazing, because we need to role model what good behavior looks like, which is what you're doing. So, like, our children and their children's children don't have the toxic leaders like we've all had in the past. Um, so I'm just blown away by what you would say to your younger self. It's so lovely. Um, but Sonia, what else would you like to say to the audience if there's something we've not covered today?
No, just, I would say again, like, take the time to do the work. It's so important. And get the right support that you feel like you need. Don't be afraid to ask for it. I'll go back to, in the Indian culture, we are very closed off. We only share these intimate details in our own family and not even with other Indians, right? So that my physical health issues, because we did it that way, it caused so much detriment to my mental health, emotional health, and spiritual health that I had to unwire, right? After, gosh, decades, in 2008, when it all blew up, I had to unwire all that stuff. And it takes time, right? But just little steps. That's how I did it, right? Just little steps every single day, focused steps. And then, you start feeling better about yourself because you are seeing improvement. And I did this with the help, because yes, once upon a time I was somebody who thought I could do everything myself. Not true. So I did get the help. I had coaches, I've had mentors, I've had doctors, I've had family, like you name it. The more people that can help me, the faster I can thrive. Right. So just don't waste time, is what I would say, right? Time is so short, so precious and valuable. So do something for yourself today that is a tiny little step, but it helps you to improve, what I call that whole body health, right? Your mental, physical, spiritual, emotional health. Um, and I'm always here to help, if you need it. So
Love that. In terms of steps, there's a quote I use in my workshops. It's by Martin Luther King Jr. He says, "Don't think of the whole staircase, just take the first step." And
yes,
that's what I say to people when they want to transform. It's like it's just that one little step each day. It's not the whole thing, because it feels overwhelming, doesn't it? And I did a talk on one of my episodes about our parents' generation, just that culture. We don't talk, we don't let anyone know, we put on that face, and we're okay. And one thing I said to my parents was, what you don't understand is by sharing our stories, we're going to help others and heal others, whereas they feel like that it's bad to tell everyone what's going on. But really, the more you share what you've got going on, the more people are like, I'm going through the same thing. Like when you shared your allergies, now people are like, oh my God, this will help my daughter, this will help this. So sharing our stories is the only way we can help others as well. And I think our parents' generation are seeing that slowly when they see us sharing and we see us helping others. But you're right, it's like a generational thing as well. We're trying to break some cycles, you know.
yes, yes.
Um, but thank you so much, Sonia, for your time. I really appreciate you
Oh,
having it. And I'm going to send you a certificate to say the first US guest.
I love
But
it.
thank you so much. But just let the audience know how they can connect with you, Sonia.
Yes, of course. Well, thank you so much for having me. SoniaHunt.com, SoniaHunt. And you can just Google Sonia Hunt TED. My book is on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. And please connect on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. It's all just Sonia Hunt everywhere. And and please share your story. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to help if I can. No, thank you. That quote for sure. I love that quote, and it's exactly what I did to get to where I am today. And I'll say the last thing I'll say is that it took me so long to get here, but I can actually say that I am thriving.
Love
So
it.
that
You're
is
living and breathing your
yes,
brand.
yes.
Thank you so much, Sonia.
Thank you.
It is now your morning and our evening, so
Yeah.
I will let you crack on with the rest of your day. But thank you for being my guest on this Wellbeing podcast. And to the audience, thank you for listening.
Bye.